Good morning, dear students. Today I am going to discuss the life of the indigenous people portrayed in Lee Miracle's novel Celia's Song. First, let us see about the writer Lee Miracle. Lee Miracle is of Salish and Cree ancestry. She was born in North Vancouver, one of the most highly published First Nation writers in Canada. And she's also an award-winning poet, novelist, performance, storyteller, scriptwriter, actor, and keeper, mythmaker. And she has also been awarded the Order of Canada. Lee Miracle is, as I had already told you, she is an essayist, poet, critic, writer. She has written both long and short prose fictions, and she is an influential Aboriginal voice in post-colonial criticism. And her writing is an innovative fusion of poetry, fiction, non-fiction, myth, and memoir that revives traditional Aboriginal stories to frame her modern tales. And her main focus is in the context of North American feminism, an approach she has described. She has described this as the decolonizing in the feminine. Within this feminine approach of viewing the world, we find her addressing issues like racism, post-colonialism, female sexuality, and creative empowerment and racial solitude. Her first novel is Bobby Lee, Indian Rebel, which was published in 1975, and this was one of the first Aboriginal work to be published in Canada, and this was followed by many other works by her in different years, and these are the books that were published by Lee Miracle. Now going over to the novel Celia's Song, let us see the very brief summary of the novel or a glimpse of the novel. Now, this particular character, Celia, she first appeared along with several other characters in Miracle's 1993 novel Raven's Song. She was seen as in that novel, she was shown as a young seer drifting on the margins of a family. And in this novel, Celia's Song, we find her as a grown-up woman, and she continues to experience strange visions and dreams, which distances her from her loved ones, especially her mother, and with whom she longs to connect. Now, Celia is a woman in her 30s who lives alone, and she is still reeling from the suicide of her adolescent son. She is a seer, sensitive to what is happening at different places, at different levels of experience, as we find in the novel. And when 5-year-old Shelley, the granddaughter of Celia's cousin, is attacked and nearly killed, Celia is compelled to find her voice and inner focus and to reclaim her place in the family circle alongside the other women who assume Shelley's care. As the village members come together to heal this little girl and her alcoholic, derelict mother, and to deal with the man who is already a victim himself, who perpetrated this crime, they take strength from their own beliefs and a deep love for one another. And Celia and her large and extended family, they have to come together to restore balance and order in their village. Strong women are the core to the group, and her mother, sister, and various aunts and cousins and fictive relatives, they all come together as the core group. Men are also portrayed in this novel in a very positive manner. Often they are willing to let the women lead. But there's one character, Jacob, a teenage cousin who had been very close to Celia's son, and he is the key to the success of all their efforts. And as we have already seen in the introduction, Lee Miracle is a master at weaving stories. And here we find her weaving the story of Celia and her family and the mink, as we find in Raven's song. Celia's song, it is a complex story which involves a mink also, who is a shapeshifter, and the mink serves as a witness to Celia and her family and whatever happens in their family. And the whites who are portrayed in this novel, they are acknowledged to have caused the destruction of their world. Mink chronicles the experiences of Celia's family in the place or in the Nuchavu territory belonging to the Stoho community over the course of several generations. And Celia's village is a fairly closed society into which some whites have moved through the establishment of affective and affiliative relations with individual indigenous people, but whose acceptance there remains quite uneasy. The Stoho people. The Stoho people, they live along the Fraser River and its tributaries. The Fraser River is located in the lower mainland of British Columbia in Canada. The Stoho are culturally related to the larger Coast Salish First Nation group who live along the Pacific Northwest coast. The Stoho believe that they have always lived there using the abundance of what Mother Nature has provided for them in the form of timber. Over millennia, they have accommodated to the changes that have taken place in the Fraser Valley. The valley is therefore the context that gives the Stoho their identity, their traditions and stories and their history. The first smallpox epidemic is believed to have come to Stoho territory in 1782, and it is also believed to have spread through intercommunity exchange networks originating in Mexico City, where the Spanish introduced it. Historians they estimated that 2/3 of Stoho died from the smallpox epidemic within a 6-week period. The first white contact came in approximately 1790 to 92. Both Spain and Britain, they laid claims to this area. Early Stoho accounts of their reaction to the Europeans were peaceful. Stoho leaders thought that the blue and grey-eyed people were sky people because their eye color resembled the blue color of the sky and the grey color of the clouds. Beginning in the 1800s, the Stoho were placed on reservations. This resulted in a loss of traditional knowledge because of the enforcement of attendance at residential schools. Other oppressive measures such as the outlawing of spiritual and traditional practices were instituted. In the 1950s, there was a repeal of laws that forbade practices such as holding of the potlatch and the spirit dancing in the longhouse, which allowed a resurgence of cultural and spiritual life. Now, according to this community, to be healthy, they need to understand that everything inside of them has got to be balanced. They should have a good understanding of themselves and everything around them, like the ground, nature, and the family. There are also some things they have to learn how to work with. There are a variety of ways, including traditional or natural medicine, spiritual healers, special ceremonies, going to the longhouse, calling the shakers to come with their songs and healing prayers, and visiting special places where the ancestors can be found. There are limits to personal responsibilities, however, and in those times, the family will step in and give help and support. Because of colonization and residential schools and assimilations, they lost a lot of their practices. Now, restoring ritual song and dancing, which is found very much in Celia's song. In Celia's song, challenges to the structural incarnations of the settler colonial system take form on two fronts. The first one is the institutional, and the second is the mythic. Institutionally, Celia and her family they refused the aid of the Canadian medical and legal establishments when confronted with a child who has been violently and sexually abused by one of their own members. They determined to keep her at home and heal her themselves, despite the severity of her injuries, and they also decide to judge and deal with the perpetrator. Amos themselves, according to their banned pre contact rituals, Amos, initially uncomprehending, appears to have at least implicitly assented to this procedure. The process of his dancing to his death is described as profoundly liberating for him as he relives and then sheds his own experiences of sexual abuse at the residual school and its toxic aftermath. So, this is a past of this person which makes him to indulge in such sexual abuse. Now, Jacob, like Celia the seer, realizes the spirit of grandmother Alice, and Alice is real. He does not want to behave or believe he is actually seeing a dead person. She is making it difficult to believe, although she is making it difficult to believe. Now, Alice is a great example of how the spirit of Alice becomes attached to the literal understanding of Jacob. Jacob himself experiences an impossible moment but realizes through his interaction with Alice that she must be real. A Western interpretation often seems to say that the traits of spirit as something unfamiliar, dangerous, or as related to a religious belief system. The ancestors are seen as spirits connected to the land. It expounds upon the relationality between humans, ancestors, and the land, that spirits are part of the ecology that binds everything together. Alice demonstrates her purpose by teaching Jacob to handle the serpent, but she also teaches him more traditional ways of being. She walks him around the mountain, pointing out the foods he needs to eat. She talks about the medicine also. With every lesson Alice gives Jacob, he swallows, and Jacob's swallowing of knowledge from Alice is similar to the swallowing the spider and the restless snake. The swallowing of knowledge is in this particular context, more reaffirming than what is found when Amos swallowed the serpent. And Jacob's swallowing of knowledge further suggests that learning is a kind of sustenance, like food. Indeed, his body and mind are entwined from moving upon the land and absorbing knowledge. The more positive outlook on swallowing seems to create a different storyline, one that recalls the principles of reciprocity and of respect. The new storyline makes it possible to rebuild the longhouse. Indeed, when Jacob returns from the mountain, he explains that the mountain has brought him a song and the dream of rebuilding the longhouse, because the mountain becomes a specific place Jacob obtains his knowledge from. And we find that Jacob is speaking with the mountain as his reference point in mind. And Jacob's dream of building the longhouse introduces the old man. And the character of this old man is related or connected with the longhouse, and he has heard the longhouse calling him, and the longhouse wants to be built. And coast Salish settlements often consisted of a series of interconnected longhouses stretching together as a single structure, sometimes for hundreds of meters. He further states that there were carved houses or carved house posts depicting family leaders, spirit helpers. The long houses were used for ceremonies and they were also used for winter dances, and they served the purpose of enabling people to rejuvenate themselves, given a name which suggests that this man may have more than human qualities. Now the old man helps Jacob and the men restore their knowledge by unloading the basket of knowledge he carried until he thought they were ready to build a long house, as we find in the novel. They re-established the longhouse potlatch ceremonies by conducting ceremonies of naming babies and celebrating weddings, and thereby the villagers are found restoring original directions. Now, Amos, because of his actions towards Shelley, has a crucial role in restoring balance and harmony in the village. So, once the longhouse is restored, they dance all day and night for 4 days, and then Jacob sings. And through the dance, we find that Amos' body sweats toxic memories, so much that all the horror stories his body collected float in his belly and leave his body through his song. The purpose of the Salish trance dance is to support the singing of personal spirit songs. She explains that the dance is done through human passion embodied and expressed one after another. It brings attention to the dances and the consequences in which people sometimes gave themselves up. And they were found to give up, like beating their own wives, dealing with drugs, and there can also be found a connection between the danger of the serpent's power and its entwinement with Amos' story. She explains that spirit has a real meaning, by which she means that the spirit is in a danger, or it is in danger in the Coast Salish people's lives. The notion of ceremonial dance that we find in this novel, it shows the cleansing of Amos' body, and that he sees his spirit or family, and establishing a fascinating link to dance as a form of embodiment. And Amos' dance builds upon that by adding the concept of spirit and spiritual cleansing and death. These spiritual activities are tied to specific Stoho worldviews. Thus, Lee Miracle's novel Celia's Song, it is a work that narrates the painful truths and fragile hopes of the Stoho community, and it is also can be seen as a bittersweet story of Celia James' family. And in this novel, Lee Miracle illuminates the harrowing experiences of Celia's people, the Stoho tribe, and their loss of tradition, which we find continually plaguing the First Nation communities. Thank you.